Welcome to Myth Informed. I'm your host, Brian Edward, and alongside me right now is an empty chair. So I'm doing a la Clint Eastwood at 2012 Republican National Convention. I'm kidding. Sean Frasick will be sitting next to me in a second, but he is at the engineering stand. And with us today are the folks from Unsafe Space. That's Keri Smith and Carter. And Carter, your Twitter handle just has Carter, so I'm going to call you Carter. You've got one name, just like Madonna. That's cool.
Yeah, well, I'm that famous.
Yeah.
It's actually, his Twitter handle is C. Laren.
Right, but my name just says.
Oh, I see.
Is that your last name?
Laren, Laren.
Okay.
It's not a secret. I'm just lazy.
Well, I thought that could be like maybe your password, so you never forgot it.
Right.
You never know what that's going to be. But the Unsafe Space, it's a really good podcast and interview show on YouTube. I looked, and there was one that I just recently watched 4 months ago, and that was you interviewing Sean Fitzgerald on kind of wokeness in elementary schools. And I'd known a little bit about this, but I had no idea how deep the rabbit hole run. And I thought that was such a good interview because if you didn't have time to listen to all of Sean's stuff, you guys summarized it pretty good in there. Like, do you remember that one? That's a little bit old.
Yeah.
But I thought,
that one's
done.
disturbing. Because the China involvement was the disturbing thing to me. Like, I have a daughter, and we have a lot of people that also come to us through elementary schools showing us all the indoctrination material. So the fact that there's a lot of indoctrination material wasn't surprising. The China connection was surprising to me.
Yeah. And that China connection, it's through, now some people know about Confucius Institutes, but that's primarily at the collegiate level. And this was at the local school level?
I think so, if I recall.
Yes.
I mean, it was a while ago for that episode, but even at the collegiate level, it's disturbing, right? I mean, the idea that it's funny that the left complained for 4 years about Russia and Russian involvement in the elections, but apparently we just don't give a crap that there's a authoritarian government superpower literally paying to indoctrinate our children.
Yeah.
Okay. We just leave that alone. That's fine.
It seemed like to me that what they were signing were contracts and agreements. They weren't allowed to criticize the Chinese government. Right now, you might see this on a level with like NDAs, Bloomberg and stuff. You remember Elizabeth Warren saying, "Let the women out of your NDAs so they can talk openly." And one can argue whether or not that's a good idea, but at least that's a private entity. And in these public schools, to have a contract to not criticize just seems wild.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a fan of public schools anyway, but if you're going to choose a private school, I would expect that to be disclosed. Hey, here are the entities we have contracts with that prohibit us from criticizing them. Like, oh, that kind of matters. And like, can you imagine going to a school and be like, oh, by the way, we signed a contract with Pfizer that will never criticize anything they do. Oh, okay. That's kind of weird. And this is just so much worse.
That's right.
We signed a contract with the Communist Party, by the way. Make no mistake about it, right? This is the Communist Party. This isn't like, there is no entity in China that's a large philanthropic organization that's not 100% controlled by the CCP. So we signed a contract with some communists about not speaking ill of them. Go American education.
Right.
Gee, I wonder why we have so many people voting for Marxism now.
No, it's weird. I mean, they're not specifically Marxist over there, but yeah, this.
No, China's not Marxist, but they are authoritarian.
They are, right. China, what is it? Socialism with Chinese characteristics.
Yes, with Chinese characteristics.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't want that a whole lot any more than Marxism or socialism. That's for sure. So speaking of this education, this is what I want to get your reaction to this tweet. So this one ticked me off this morning. This is when I saw it. This is Scientific American from their Twitter, and they say this. Scientific American has never endorsed a presidential candidate in our 175-year history until now. The 2020 election is literally a matter of life and death. We urge you to vote.
Wait a minute. Are they going to endorse Trump?
Oh, hang on. It's still going.
Okay.
So the 2020 election is literally a matter of life and death. We urge you to vote for health, science, and Joe Biden for
And dementia.
president. For president. Now, they follow up this with a tweet, and they said, the evidence and the science show that Donald Trump has badly damaged the U.S. and its people because he rejects evidence and science. The most devastating example in this willfully ignorant response to COVID-19 pandemic, which cost more than 190,000 Americans their lives. What's your thoughts?
Okay.
Go ahead, Keri.
Well, first of all, what do they go on to list? Do they provide evidence for what science he rejected?
They say the mismanagement. No, so they don't.
Okay.
COVID is the big thing, though. Is that right? Is that their big piece of evidence?
That's the one they highlighted.
Inspired wildfires in the West.
So they say, among others, right? So they say the most devastating example is his willfully ignorant response to the pandemic. So that assumes that there are others.
Steel man.
Yeah, that's the centerpiece.
Well, my thoughts are when I hear stuff like that, I always want to get to the specifics. We live in an age where there's so much propaganda now. They tell us what to think. They tell us what they think, but they never back it up with examples. It's like when I see the stuff about him being a racist, and I'm one of those people who used to believe all of that stuff, and it's presented as fact, and they'll say it as if it's something we all agree on. So they say in this piece that you're reading me, his willfully ignorant mismanagement. Do they go on to say, here's an example of it? Here's the science he ignored. It's just their characterization, and I'm just supposed to take that at face value? I find it very insulting.
Right.
And look, the U.S., if you look at the COVID pandemic numbers, pandemic's not even the right word. I think the CDC even admitted that it's not a pandemic now. So, okay, fine. If you look at the COVID numbers, the U.S. was kind of middle of the pack to act in terms of restricting immigration from travel from China.
Yeah.
And we're kind of middle of the pack in terms of death rate. There's nothing unique about the U.S. response compared to just pick any European nation. The U.K. is doing much worse than we are. There's a couple European nations doing better. It's not like we're this statistical outlier. And look what we did, and look what everyone else did. And if you remember at the time, when even though Trump did go up in front of America and try and calm people down by basically lying, which is what you expect from any politician, like it'll be fine. Okay, so he's telling people not to panic. I don't like lying, but that's not unique to Trump. But the other side at the same time was calling him a racist and a xenophobe for restricting travel from China and telling their people to go to Chinese New Year on the streets of New York City. And Trump's just making a big deal out of this because he's a racist xenophobe. So the thing that bothers me the most about this is I don't like this appeal to quote science. It's the most unscientific thing that you could possibly imagine. Science is something that is your personal responsibility. Science is rational weighing of evidence and using your own judgment based on evidence and reason to reach a conclusion. Fundamentally, that's what science is. I mean, I know there's a scientific method and whatever. Science is not what do the scientists that run a publication that got science in the name say? Mm-hmm. Science is not what do a bunch of people who have science degrees or even not science degrees but have jobs that where the word science is listed, funded by the government, what do they say? Like, science is not policy. It's not a policy position. It's not consensus. It's not settled. That's not the way that they use science. What they mean when they say science is please worship scientists and please worship these particular scientists. This is our new priestly class. It's the scientists that are part of the mainstream narrative. That's it. And there's nothing more anti-scientific than that. Just like they've named racism anti-racism, they've named this science. They're doing this in the name of science. This is not science. There's nothing scientific about this at all.
Yeah. Doesn't it feel like an opinion? One could say that Trump has mismanaged the COVID-19 crisis. That's fine. And you could back that up
that's
with
a fine
evidence.
Opinion to have.
Well, the thing for me with Trump is if we're going to say who handled it well, who arguably handled it the best? would you say, the New Zealand because they had no cases? I mean, I don't know.
It depends on what you mean by the best.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, China did a pretty damn good job. My wife is on her way to China tomorrow, and they're not wearing masks. They can gather. They're fine. Now, they're also authoritarians who locked people into apartment complexes against their will, and instituted draconian measures. Like, what does well mean?
Right. But
they did well if that's your goal. Sure.
Can we say China handled it well? I mean, that's the big question. Like when Trump was on television every day, and you had Fauci on television, you had all these press conferences, and they would always show the numbers, and it was all the countries, but China was never on that list. And why is that? Because they likely they weren't reporting their numbers, they weren't doing the testing, and
it's hard to say what their numbers are. Yeah,
exactly.
That's certainly an issue. But there's 1.3 billion people in China or something. So I mean, they can't be hiding numbers that are as big on average as the UK's. Right? That's just not possible.
See, I don't know.
I'm still unclear on what it is that the people who hate Trump, like, what are the specifics that they think he should have done differently?
Yes, that's my
I haven't
question.
heard that articulated.
Yes, that's exactly right. That's my question.
So,
what could he have done better?
One of the things I hear is that he should have had a national plan, that he should have taken the lead and said, Governor X, Governor Y, Governor Z, this is what we're doing, and lobbying and pushing on them all to do that.
Which they did have the national plan that no one really followed, the phases, right?
But they meant on things like masks, things on treatment, things on testing.
Fauci came out and said, don't wear a mask in the beginning.
Yeah.
Notice that these are the same people who, for his entire presidency before this, was Trump's a dictator. He's gonna seize power. He's gonna seize power. Oh, you should have seized power.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, he did what I would have done, frankly, in the sense that I would have said it's up to the states. The federal government doesn't have the authority to do anything here. Here's some guidelines. I'm not saying I would have done everything he did, but it's up to the states. We are a federation of states. That's what we are. So make up your minds.
Right.
You want Cuomo's going to manage it for you in New York. That's how it goes. You voted for the guy. He's in charge.
Yeah. But
and by the way, to go to your point about science and about how they worship certain scientists or certain professionals, and they never acknowledge when those same medical experts contradict themselves, or in Fauci's case, like you mentioned, Fauci told us not to wear a mask, and then he said suddenly he changed his opinion, and he admitted that he lied. He said he lied because he thought there would be a shortage on masks. Well, okay, thank you for giving me your reasoning for lying.
Yes.
But you lied.
Right.
And so now I'm supposed to trust you?
Right. Well,
and they have a problem with Trump supposedly downplaying, when I think all he was doing is what a competent leader does, which is try and make sure he doesn't cause a panic.
Right.
That he helps to alleviate panic and to make people calmer. They have a problem with that, but they don't have a problem with Fauci lying, and then they still take whatever he says at face value when he came out and said he lied. Plus, we have medical experts who told us that they were all against protesting against the lockdown, and I noticed a lot of the politicians followed suit. A lot of the politicians, especially from the Democratic Party, followed suit, and they were like Gretchen in Michigan, Queen Gretchen. They were all against the lockdown protests. But then as soon as George Floyd happened, had like 1,200 medical professionals. So these are scientists who came out and said that we should be protesting because systemic racism is a public health concern.
Yeah. And Fauci was silent on that. Yeah, that's the point. It's like what and I think that for when we had this talk at the Better Discourse event, I love Mikey Harlow's take on this, because obviously Jack understood how it started and he was able to go into detail, but Mike came from a really real person's angle of what are you supposed to do? You're told to social distance, then you're told protesting's okay, then you're told, oh, you got to wear a mask, then you're told all these, what are we supposed to do? It's very confusing.
I think that might be by design.
Go ahead, Keri.
Well, just so that we're in this state of whatever they say goes. And they can change it. They can change what they're telling us to do. They can change the mandates. And what I've been most surprised about, I guess, during this pandemic for the past few months. Has it been how many months now? 6 months?
Yeah.
Is watching how easily led the public is at large to do things that are even nonsensical. I was telling Carter, I've been on a very long road trip for about a month, which has been fun because I've been able to see different parts of the country, and some parts of the country have been very lax with their COVID public response in terms of like in Idaho, no one was wearing a mask in the places I was at. They also have one of the lowest rates of infection, but other places there were a lot of mask mandates. And so Santa Fe, for example, it was so absurd to me. Everyone was wearing a mask outside there.
Yeah.
And I wasn't used to seeing that. And then they would sit outside restaurants and everybody would have their mask on. And then as soon as you go through the doors and get to your table, they all take the mask off. It's like, what's the difference?
Yes.
You're sitting outside with the mask on,
Yeah.
and then you come in and take it off. And
Yeah.
we're adults.
Yeah.
And you're pretending like it makes a difference in one place, but then magically, because you're eating now,
Yeah.
let's not worry about it.
Yep.
I just don't understand how we're so easily led.
Yeah.
The whole idea.
I'm going to speak in defense of the Scientific American article
Yeah.
because there's something I like about it. No, there's something I like about it. The corporate press generally is Michael Malice says this. The corporate press is the enemy of the people. I'm 100% in agreement with him. I think the beautiful thing about this year is average people who don't normally think deeply about questioning the media.
Yeah.
Now have the media has lost all credibility.
Mm-hmm.
Regular people look at this Scientific American tweet. I've got it pulled up here. A normal person looks at this and goes, "Oh, so now Scientific American is full of shit."
Yep.
They don't say, "Can I swear in the show?" Sorry.
Absolutely.
They don't look at this and say, "Oh, the scientists think I should pull the donkey lever." No one thinks that.
Yep.
Everyone looks at this tweet and goes, "Oh, so you're full of shit too. Thanks for letting me know." It's just all the institutions are they're just waving flags showing you like, "Hey, we're full of shit."
Yeah.
Okay, now we know. Thank you. Thank you for showing us your mask has slipped, metaphorically, and I guess literally, your mask has slipped. Now we know. We can move on with our lives and ignore the Scientific American in terms of their, quote, expertise on anything, because they're just a political organization, just like Amazon, frankly, or any of the other corporate woke. I know that some of these companies are pretending to be woke, but it doesn't matter. Maybe we'll pick on CNN instead. Just flip through any random headlines that you see any day from CNN, and regular people look at it and go, "Oh, you're just full of shit now. You're biased. You're just making stuff up. I don't care." And I think that's the right that's the right relationship to have with the mainstream media, is to think that they are worthless.
But don't you think that I'm not ready to say that Scientific American, because I don't know that much about them, to say that they are now a political entity. I know enough about like the Southern Poverty Law Center to say yes, they've passed that invisible line. But Scientific American, maybe they've been seduced, right? That if you're a scientist, you have to avoid being seduced by this politics. You have to avoid being seduced by somebody giving you a lot of money to get a certain result, and so on and so forth. And that's what I think they're doing.
But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if they're seduced because they're idiots or they're doing it intentionally. The end result is the same. You can't trust what they're saying because it's politically motivated.
That I agree. But
the average person doesn't care about the motivation behind the person who owns the Scientific American Twitter account, nor should they.
But they will consistently say, well, Trump is so divisive. That's why he can't lead on COVID, right? But individual governors have done very well. DeSantis in Florida is doing very well with the large state in comparison. The 5 states that have the biggest are New York, New Jersey, Texas, California, and one other, right? It's all the biggest states. But if you look at Florida, based on population, they're doing comparatively very, very well.
Well, can I just again, what is very well? Because honestly,
compared to other states,
what I'm seeing, and we're starting to see this in the Midwest now, where we've been sheltered for so long, and now you're starting to see the spikes. Essentially, I think what's happened is, everyone was against the herd immunity strategy, but what's happening is we're seeing it. It's just at a slower pace. So it's starting to burn through communities, even though we're doing the best we can, because there's no stopping this thing. If you talk about New Zealand, if you talk about these countries that handle it well, guess what happens when they open the borders? Guess what happens when people start traveling and tourism starts again? I mean, it's not going away. So like my question is, what does very well even mean? I mean, is it just by default that it's just burning through and now we're seeing less? I mean, that's honestly what I think personally.
I mean, probably.
How
but,
well
I mean,
you've protected your vulnerable?
I'm not one of these people who thinks that COVID's nothing. I don't think it's just the flu. I don't think it's nothing. But it's also not. This isn't the zombie apocalypse, right?
Yeah.
You could have easily handled this by just saying, oh, if you have, by the way, if you don't have pre-existing conditions, if there aren't secondary factors, you have a very low risk rate, especially kids. Very, very low probability of anything going wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I think you'd say, look, elderly people with co-mitigation risk, isolate yourselves, stay home.
As much as you
can. We're going to try and we're going to let herd mentality happen. But instead, we did the opposite. We said, how can we get average citizens with no health risks to obey like a bunch of zombies? Okay.
Right.
And this is just a social experiment at this point.
But listen. Okay, go ahead, Keri.
No, I like the phrase social experiment. That's definitely that comes to mind when I'm out in public and I see the absurd things that people are doing.
Yeah.
Again, with the restaurant story, I mean, I had to put it on when I walked in the restaurant because I'm not wearing it outside. I'm sorry. I'm not sorry. But then when I went inside, they made me put it on to walk 6 steps and then take it off.
Yeah.
Why am I doing this? It's just, it feels like a social experiment to see if I will.
Yeah.
To see if I will comply.
It's
those 6 steps.
Yeah. It's the false sense of security that just doesn't exist. Yeah, it's the same thing when you guys were here. Like when we were in the lobby of the hotel, we had to have it on as soon as we got to the bar area. It was like, 6 feet away, then you take it off. It doesn't make any sense,
Yeah, a friend of mine whose father recently had a head injury and is in the hospital, I asked, well, how's the situation there? Only one person is allowed, so his wife is in there, but his daughter can't join the mom. And I said, well, how are the hospitals? And she said, well, there's a massive line waiting up to get a visitor's pass. So you have all these people now gathered together in a line trying to... So you're creating the same problems. I mean, I get the idea of limiting visitors. At the same time, you're not socially distanced. It's creating so many other problems.
That's like during the... I'm sorry, I talked over you, Sean.
Oh, no, go ahead. No, I was just saying it's unstoppable. Like, if we're not going to stop this thing.
Yeah. Well, Brian, what you're saying made me think of during the lockdown. So Texas has done a few different measures, and now they have the mask mandate. Before they had the lockdown. And the lockdown was also absurd to me because they were funneling everyone in my small town into just a small number of shops.
Mm-hmm.
So instead of having every mom and pop shop open, you've got the one H-E-B grocery store open and everyone is going there.
Yeah.
So
good for them.
How's this smart?
Right.
Well, that gets to the other thing I mentioned the other day, Keri, which is, aside from a social experiment, this is a massive wealth transfer because mom and pop shops are being forced to close, but Amazon's doing fine.
That's right.
The large stores that can deal with the regulations or had the cushion to ride this out for a little bit and adjust their business model and their costs, they can survive. But it's wiping out mom and pop shops. And I thought the left used to be all about the small business and mom and pop shops, and they hated the Walmarts and the big companies. But this is an unconscionable transfer of wealth is happening right now, and no one's saying anything about it, and that really pisses me off.
Yeah, we are. I mean, the unemployment rate's down to 8.4%, but if you don't allow these small businesses to open up and to get back to capacity, I mean, it's just going to get worse. And that's one of the things, like in Wisconsin here, it's getting cold already. Like, it's 50 degrees. Pretty soon the outdoor seatings and, being able to sit outside, that's not going to be an option for us. So we're going to have to get very, very tough very quick.
Yeah. But in fact, I think they're saying the opposite. Like, for example, the Atlantic this summer said that James Mattis, the former Secretary of Defense, said Donald Trump was a threat to the Constitution, right? An objective threat to the Constitution by ordering the military to violate the rights of citizens. So that was his claim to...
What was he referring?
Right. This was when Trump was talking about calling in the military to put down certain riots, either in Portland or in other cities. right? And this is when the New York Times sent who is that? The senator from Arkansas, Tom Cotton. So he had written in defense of this, and then that's what got the editor there fired, because no senator can talk about it in existing policy. But that's a threat. But none of this, the threats of governors locking down people. There's other, and it's not just locking down businesses and doing what you said there on the economic end, but also forced quarantines. I mean, that's on the books. You can take people away. Could you take your 16-year-old kid from somebody and make them quarantine in a hotel room or something? That is wild. And nobody's saying that's a threat to the Constitution.
Quarantines are for sick people. So I don't even like this word. This is not a quarantine. You don't quarantine healthy people. Quarantine is for sick people. This is just prison. This is just a control. This is not a quarantine.
But still, where are those assaults to civil liberties? I mean, if Trump really wanted to be an autocrat, wouldn't he have taken this pandemic and then said, yep, we do have to unify. Governors, you don't get to do what you want. You have to do what I say. I mean, this would have been the time, and you know what? A certain part would have totally supported him. A certain part would have been screaming about their civil liberties, and it would be exactly flipped, right? I think a good chunk of the right would be screaming. I know I would be. I don't care if Trump is usurping my liberties or if it's Biden or Kamala Harris or whoever. I'm upset with that. But why? Why didn't he do it? None of this makes any sense. And don't you think that the media is raising the temperature as much as Trump has?
Oh, more. I think more.
I would say.
And this is coming from someone who, I'm a lifetime Democrat.
Yeah.
I voted for my first Republican in 2018. I voted for Ted Cruz because he was the most liberal of my two options. And I've recently decided I'm voting for Trump because I also view Trump as the most liberal of my options. And I know other liberals and progressives. And I know that because of the walkaway circles I travel in now and stuff, it's going to select for me to meet more people who are walking away. But I also know people from my real life that I've known since before I started this transformation, and some of them are liberals and progressives who are voting for Trump as well. And I have a problem with, as I was saying to you before we started, lately I've just been a little flabbergasted because I do know so many people who are waking up, and like you're saying, Carter, things like the Scientific American endorsing Biden are causing people to realize how the media is functioning as propaganda. And I know those kind of people, but I'm flabbergasted about the ones who are not opening their eyes. And I still know a lot of those people. And I don't understand it. I don't get it, because if you can look at the media and say, well, sometimes within the same day, a publication on Twitter would chastise Trump for going ahead with plans for a rally. And they would say, oh my goodness, how Trump is going to have a rally in the age of COVID during this dangerous pandemic. And then an hour later, they would tweet about the beautiful, peaceful protests happening. And have pictures there celebrating with like musicians and a huge crowd of thousands and Democratic politicians. And that was fine. And so if you can look at those two things and it doesn't cause you to question, even if you're entrenched, even if you hate Trump and you're like I used to be, like fully in your tiny little echo chamber, that doesn't insult you. I don't understand that.
I wanted to ask you guys this question. So I'm the same way. So I voted Democrat my whole life. I actually didn't vote last election because I didn't. But this year will be the first time I actually vote conservative, which is kind of crazy.
Wow.
Because like you said, it's more liberal option. And I know Carlin's in the chat, and I wanted to. I have the skinny on. I might be getting an exclusive new lecture from Robin DiAngelo. I know someone that may have hired her for a thing, so that's going to be interesting. So, Carlin, I'll let you know when I get that.
And shout out to Miles said you did great on Fox and Friends. Did not see that, so I'll have to check that out.
So, the point I was driving at, the critical race theory stuff, what I'm starting to see, and I wanted to get your guys' opinion on this. So, there's TDS is strong. Like there's a lot of people I know, especially in like corporate
Trump derangement syndrome,
where the Trump derangement, it's so strong. No matter what, it's like, oh my God, I can't stand him. But this critical race theory, being under the microscope now, and Black Lives Matter, in my opinion, flying too close to the sun, I think it's starting to change some of those people because they're dealing with it in work. They're dealing with it. These are people that weren't political, but they hated Trump. Are you guys starting to see that? Like, are you starting to see like those people? Because I think those people are the most important in this upcoming election. Those that aren't really political, hate Trump, but are also sick of the woke stuff. Like, what do you guys think about that?
I mean, I think the more you have to deal with the woke stuff, the more you hate it. I mean, I was talking to someone the other day about just the riots, and he was saying, if you want to protect your neighborhood, you got to make friends with your neighbors, and it kind of doesn't matter who they voted for, or even if they're on the side of Black Lives Matter and the rioters, because once the rioters come down the street to burn their house or to do something to their property, you'll be amazed at how quickly they will flip to, got to protect my property. I don't like the riots anymore.
Yep.
But I live in the Bay Area in California, and let me say, in 2016, just driving around, you would see a myriad of HRC signs. It was all "I'm with her," Hillary Clinton, Hillary 2016, blah, blah, everything, all over the place.
Yep.
And of course, no one's dumb enough to put a Trump sign up because your house would have gotten burned down even in 2016. So, no one put Trump signs up, but everyone had Hillary signs up. This election, I've counted, I think, 2 Biden signs. No one has Biden signs up. And I think that is, I don't know if people are necessarily waking up to, I don't think they're waking up to like liking Trump. I think they are just disenfranchised because Biden is not, there's nothing exciting about that ticket.
Yeah.
And when you watch the Democratic National Convention, for a 90s Democrat who only tunes in periodically, these people appear to be insane.
Yep.
The stuff that they are talking about is absolutely insane. And so you think, you're kind of not paying attention. You're doing your thing. Oh yeah, Black Lives Matter. Those are 3 words that sound nice. I'll mouth those. And systemic oppression, that sounds fine. Sure, I'm against racism, blah, 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 blah. Anti-racism, that sounds good. But then you listen to them and you get to see what they actually believe. And the moment that you see what they actually believe, you realize, oh my God, these people are crazy authoritarians. What happened to the Democratic Party? And even if it doesn't make you go towards Trump, it probably makes you not put the Biden sign in your front lawn and maybe stay home on election day. So I think if Trump doesn't win, it's going to be, I'll be very shocked if he doesn't win, with the exception of that I do understand that big tech and everyone else is really trying to sway the election.
Yeah.
Pretty hard.
What do you think, Keri?
It's a hard question for me to ask, to answer, again, because I can't tell if my perception is skewed. I know a lot of people, as Carter's saying, as they, I guess, like normies, normies come into contact with woke ideology, I think a lot of them are starting to push it away. I think what really matters is who wins the culture war over CRT, at the level of public consciousness, at the level of media and social media. And those of us who have been pushing back against my old ideology for a while now, I think this side has struck some good blows. I think Christopher Rufo and Casey Peterson did a lot to strike a blow, because the federal government saying that taxpayer funds can no longer go to fund very racist critical race theory indoctrination at labs like Cynthia Labs, that only goes so far. I mean, if a Democrat is elected, that'll be reversed,
Yeah.
But I think culturally, in terms of what the masses think, and a lot of the masses are, like we said, it seem to be easily led, and it depends on who's winning that culture war. And for a while, the woke-tivists have been winning that culture war online. And social media, people have been so afraid to stand up against it because they've been afraid of being called a racist or being called a sexist or Nazi or all these really awful slurs that they throw at people have kept people silent. But I do sense that that's changing.
I do too.
And I think the president's the blow that they struck with forcing it out of the federal labs. I think that is helping to change the culture, maybe.
Yeah.
So.
But they're going to double down. The left is not.
They
going
will
to
double
say,
down.
Oh well, we've been caught. We should dial it back.
Right.
They're just going to escalate. That's my concern.
What would you say?
One thing about it going. I'll say one other thing is, we started talking about, so after George Floyd, Carter and I've been doing this show now for 2 years, right? And it's been about maybe 3 years that I've been coming out since I left social justice ideology. It entered a new phase after George Floyd, and it could have been anything, but that happened to be what worked, and it helped take it into a new phase of the belief system, in which it was a phase in which they activated all of these sort of sleeper cells of social justice, these people who had accepted casually tenets of the ideology but had never been active, like preachers. They had never been out there pushing it. Mm-hmm. And this phase basically said everyone has to preach it, or else you are guilty of being racist. Silence is violence. And so all those people started preaching it on social media, and then all the corporations started preaching it. They're still preaching it. And that was a bad thing. But at the same time, I always see this balance of like bad and good. And the silver lining, the good part of that was that I think they sped it up too fast.
Yes. Yeah. They flew too close to the sun. They put themselves under the microscope. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, people are talking about the flags in the chat, and someone saying in the Bay Area they only saw one Biden sign. I travel through rural Ohio and Indiana all the time. I see Trump signs everywhere.
Yeah.
Right? There's the 2020 F the bullshit, no more bullshit, stuff like that, just regular Trump pen signs. So people in rural America are definitely not afraid to put them out.
Well, we did the videos in Kenosha, and there was nobody here for Biden. It was so crazy seeing the stark difference between like Trump and then Biden. Like no one was here. Like if you guys are interested, we have a lot of Twitter videos. It's like nobody here. It was it was crazy.
My final 2 cents on that is I think that it's intersectionality. Like it had a certain play for Hillary, right? She has at least a small intersectional component that Biden, as an old white man, I guess cis, does not have, right? Unless we're talking about weird sexual proclivities as a new minority, right? Sniffing people's hair and stuff. But anyways, what I'm worried about is the middle apolitical voter that says this, and he comes to you and says, Keri, I'm not really for Trump or Biden. I don't usually vote. I feel like I have to vote, and I'm worried about the riots and the violence. And I don't know. I just think that Biden, if you vote Biden, this stuff will be more go away. Mm-hmm. What do you say to that person?
Well, first of all, I know one of those people who's a non-voter, usually who's decided, and who's on the left and who has decided to vote, and they're voting Trump. Because of the riots. But if I were to meet someone who said that I'm a non-voter, I'm on the left, and I'm voting Biden, I mean, I guess I would ask them what do they think that he is going to do that. Why are they voting for him?
Well, if they
Can
say,
they give me
Biden,
specifics on what they think he's going to do to quell the violence?
Biden seems
or
like
do they
a
think
healer.
that the violence is going to stop?
Yes.
Almost like a you're being blackmailed. Kamala Harris said the violence is going to continue. The peaceful protests are going to continue. Yeah. Unless Biden's elected. It sounds like you're blackmailing me.
Yeah. It is.
I have to vote for you to stop it.
But what if they said he's a healer though? Trump certainly does, like him or hate him, and doesn't feel like a healer. Biden seems like a healer, and
really?
Even who's the conservative on The View, McCain.
McCain.
Yeah. So she said like Biden has, and I think her quote was that he is a grief whisperer. So when her dad died,
I guess I would say, what did you think about Obama? And even if you didn't vote for him, but I'm assuming this hypothetical person supported Obama. I voted for Obama twice. Did you think he was a healer? He certainly sounded like a healer. Mm-hmm. But objectively looking at his record, now that I'm on the other side of it, and it's taken me a while because I was one of those people who once I voted for him, I just quit paying attention. Mm-hmm. I was very active during the George W. Bush years. I was protesting every weekend during the week. I was as completely every single thing that guy did. I was writing letters. I was aware of it. I was sharing about it. I was doing mass emails. And then as soon as I helped to elect Obama, I was like, oh, good. I don't have to pay attention.
Go back to sleep.
And
right.
Go back to sleep, America. What is that old gosh, I'm blanking on his Bill Hicks joke.
Yeah.
You know, go back to sleep, America. Your government's in control.
Yeah.
But that was me. And so, but now on the other side of it, I'm trying to educate myself about what Obama's record actually was. And yes, he sounded very good. He sounded like a healer. But look at all the new wars he got us involved in. Look at all the drone strikes that happened under Obama. What do you say?
Back
Carter?
on something?
Yeah.
So I'll fall into this camp that I'm about to describe. I think there's a large contingency of the United States that doesn't want healing. We want someone to defend us. We are under constant attack by radical, critical race theory, crazy pseudo-Marxists, and we're sick and tired of it. We want someone to stand up and defend us. That's what we want. I don't need some guy to sing Kumbaya and get us all to hold hands. I need someone to shut down the rioters, someone to stop the violence, someone to get rid of this crazy racism being peddled as anti-racism in all of our schools and our corporations. We need someone to defend America, not someone to like huddle together and you know, hug us.
Yeah.
So I think this whole idea that we need a healer is bullcrap. We need someone to actually defend what America stands for. And I don't think Trump's the best person at all. And there's a lot I don't like about Trump. But the one thing he does is he cares about America overtly. He at least pays lip service to America matters, the values that make America are important. And he actively fights the culture war. He actively fights against social justice ideology. And that is the most internally, SJW ideology is the most existential threat that we face. And like, I don't understand why we're going to focus on like, can't we all just get along? Like, how about I'd be happy with dividing a line and saying, you guys go over in that part of the country and the rest of us will go over here. Like, we just want to be left alone. We don't want this encroaching on our lives.
Well,
and you can't escape it. It's inescapable right now.
Well, plus they're creating the polarization that they're telling us we need someone to heal.
Yeah.
Again, it's a form of blackmail.
Yes.
The media creates this divisive. Everything Trump says, it's just one of the things that started to wake me up about how wrong I was about Trump on some things, is that I started to noticing that the media lies to me. I was well aware during the Bush years that they were lying to me about going to war with Iraq. I was well aware, you know, I paid attention back then, and I noticed how they were selling us this war. And then I quit paying attention.
Yeah.
And so now when I look at it, I'm like, the media it doesn't matter what Trump does. They're going to tell me how awful it is.
Yep.
We talked about how he handled COVID crisis. If he had done it the other way, if he had done it the way they say they want it doesn't matter what they say. If he had done it that way, they would have criticized him for doing it that way. No matter what he does, they're going to attack him. That's the conclusion I've come to. And so they're creating this divisive country, this polarized country. They're creating this division. They're stoking it.
Yep.
They benefit from it. And then they tell us we need someone to heal it. And if you get the Democrat in there, we're going to start doing puff pieces and you know, kissing the ass again of the president like we did during Obama. And you're going to get to go back to sleep and think everything's pretty cool.
That's right.
Yeah. And those that, if you're calling for healing, and that might be an okay position, but you have a special obligation to not spew invective.
Yeah.
Right? If you are calling for healing, you can't, at one hand, be partisan. And this is like back to that Scientific American tweet when they say, this is a matter of life or death. We urge you to vote for health science and vote Joe. Doesn't that imply that all of those that are voting for Trump are voting for death?
Yeah. Well, I think
seriously. And now what are we going to do with them? Biden wins. We have 47% of the country, or 46 or something, that voted for death.
Right.
What do we do with these people? That's not healing.
They've just doubled down on the deplorable trope.
Yeah.
Right
Yeah.
now, we're not just deplorable. We're racist and we want death.
Yeah.
Okay.
But
Let's see if that works out for them.
Yeah, for me, it's interesting. It's interesting dichotomy though, because you could see the Democrats are playing up to the blue pill people, the people that, like we were talking about, the people that don't want to engage in politics. They've already had to go through the corona craziness. Their jobs are in jeopardy. They have to care about their families. There's a whole lot going on in their life. They typically don't pay attention to politics. They want to go back to sleep. Those people. But it's interesting to see. Trump doesn't get enough credit for this, and I think it's a brilliant move because he's always complaining about the media, which obviously for obvious reasons, and there's a lot of people with Carter's passion that are awake, that have taken the red pill. Instead of I think he's going to be the last president to ever do this, but he's tweeting independent journalists like Carlin, like Ian Miles Chong, like Sidney Watson, like Elijah Wright. I mean, Andy No. Like every day you see like.
Didn't Carlin get tweeted too?
Yeah, that's what I said. Carlin. That was the first. And he like accepted the Joe Rogan invitation. I mean, it's an interesting thing to see like how Trump's playing the game versus how the Democrats are. It's a really red pill versus blue pill thing. It's crazy.
Or centralized versus
because
decentralized.
Trump doesn't need corporate press to provide cover for him.
Yeah.
He is. I mean, I don't like everything about Trump. So I don't want to be painted with this Trumper, brush. But
right.
He is who he is. He's comfortable with who he is. He seems to be overly comfortable with who he is most times. And he's willing to just go like, okay, this is the thing I like. I'm retweeting it. Oh, some guy, Joe Rogan's got 4 million followers and he wants me to be in a debate. Okay. The left needs the cover of institutions, because without the cover of institutions like Scientific American, running your interference for them, all they have to offer is hate, divisiveness, racism, and Marxism. They have nothing to offer. So, and they need that. So the left, oddly enough, if like historically, I know this isn't how people think of the left, but the left needs the establishment.
Yeah.
They need the establishment, and Trump doesn't. Trump doesn't. He can, we could, all of the major newspapers and television channels could go away tomorrow, and Trump would be fine.
Yeah.
He can deal with whatever the new reporters that rise from the internet are and be fine.
Well, they've become the establishment too. I mean, that's why you see liberals and progressives like myself voting for Trump, because look, all of the corporations are speaking woke ideology. Every major corporation, my old party is speaking woke ideology. They're all, they want to talk about institutionalized racism and sexism. Their ideology has become institutionalized. Yeah. They are the status quo. I was just at the beginning of my this leaving my old belief system after Trump won, when the Women's March started. But even then, when I was starting to open my eyes to things, I was also trying to figure out what's going on with me and why am I noticing these things? Why am I upset about these things that I've always been okay with? And is it just me? And I was trying to figure that out, but I had some gut resistance to the resistance movement. I had gut resistance to resistance because I was like, what are they resisting?
Yeah.
Even I think I knew, I was like, wait, but you are the status quo. Look how many people you get out there and you all have your printed signs. You're getting your signs from someone. You all have the same slogans. You all have the same hats. Like you're corporatized almost.
Yeah.
It's like the gay. I went to a lot of gay rights parades and marches over my career. I worked with a lot of comedians, used to be heavily plugged into that part of the social justice community. And at some point I started to notice that all the gay pride parades were like different corporations. It's like, here's the Starbucks float and, Altoids. And it's just like, bring in all the corporations,
that's
guys.
Right. That's right.
To put a cherry,
that's modern left.
Yeah, it is. And I'm going to get to the super chats here in a second, but to put a cherry on top, what I just think it's weird is you don't see a lot of companies saying, hey, we are a pro-choice company or we're a pro-life company. You do see some, right? They tend to be smaller businesses, and the numbers of them are small percentages. But most people don't say, hey, we've just decided Nike is now pro-choice or pro-life or something, or Amazon is now pro-whatever. That's so weird. But yet critical race theory just gets shoved in there. Do they not know that at least half the country, if not more, disagrees? Yeah.
No, it's the Passover. It's the blood over the door so they don't get, And it's interesting, the point Keri brought up. Yeah, like in the 90s, like when we were protesting for gay rights and for all the things that the liberals stood for back then, it wasn't corporate sponsored. Like we didn't have, like once you have corporate sponsors, you should be like kind of check yourself and be like, that's a great point.
It's like if Michael Moore had gone out on tour brought to you by Aetna.
Exactly.
Like
exactly. Exactly right. This mosh pit's sponsored by right. Right.
That's great. Hit the Rage Against the Machine concert. Oh, that's awesome. Brought to you by Nabisco.
Yeah.
Chase Bank.
Yeah.
That's even better. So Miles Kinslow, thanks for the super chat, says, "Hey guys, love the interview. Voting for Trump. He is a fighter. I still remember when he brought out the Clinton accusers. So do I.
That's true.
That was an epic move. Yeah, Steve Bannon there was an interview with him that I watched somewhere where they talked about actually doing that.
Yeah.
And it was his idea, but then he got Trump's okay literally like a few hours before that happened. They had him all ready to go, and Trump okayed it. So that's interesting. It was definitely interesting whether you like Bannon or not.
It's theatrical too.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh, I mean that is the reality.
Well, but it was also responsive because that's what they were attacking him because of the grab him by the pussy thing, you know.
Right.
So it was responding to that. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like New York getting Pumpkin and New York back together, right? You know, there's going to be some sparks. Little Ragamuffins. Thanks for the super chat. Says,
thank you.
Tossing y'all some coin for being kick-ass enough to have these two troublemakers on your program, and also freedom. Yeah.
Little Ragamuffin is the William Wallace of the independent sewing community.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I bet you didn't know there was William Wallace of the independent sewing community, but now you do.
Now we do.
Yeah, he's 6'7", right? He's a giant, and he could crush a man with his hand, right? I really do love that. You know, would you give? He goes, if you stay and fight, you may die, but wouldn't you trade? Think about it, lying there in your beds, old and gray. Wouldn't you trade all the time, from that time until then, for one chance to look your enemy in the face and say, you might take our lives, but you will never take our freedom. So I love that.
Bad movie
It
quotes.
really
Keep
is a good
going.
movie quote.
Yeah.
Ken, oh man, I'm going to group this up.
Onufrichuk.
Thank you. I might have gotten that, but maybe 20% chance. Thanks for the super chat. New subscriber, good luck. Fight the good fight.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
That is what we're trying to do.
So I want to ask you guys this because I know Carter, you see eye to eye with us on a lot of things, and Keri, it's an interesting combo. So the whole becoming a conservative. So I still don't view myself as a conservative. I view myself as a traditional liberal from the 90s that unfortunately the left has left me. But like when we see stories like Cuties, the Cuties thing, where it was essentially the conservatives that were calling that out and the left was defending that. For those that don't know, that's the
most people didn't. Most of the people on the left, to be fair,
but there were people on the left that are still defending it, which is strange. You know, how I mean, when you see things like this start to evolve, how can you how do you like square the circle? How do you say, okay, yeah, I'm still a liberal, but you know, like this is what my people are doing and saying? Like, doesn't this make it easier to like call like to be in the conservative camp? Like, I don't know.
Is that a question for me?
Yeah, for both of you guys.
Well,
go ahead, Keri.
I think well for a while when I was first started leaving social justice, I was trying to figure out what I was. Because people always ask me, and people have a need to put other people in boxes so they can understand you more easily. Mm-hmm. Obviously, it's like there's a shorthand there. And so I was, well, am I a liberal? Am I conservative? Am I libertarian? I don't know. The way in which I understand myself currently is that on a lot of policy positions, I'm still a liberal. And a lot of my philosophical beliefs, I'm a liberal. I'm like you, Sean.
Yeah.
But on some of my personal beliefs, I've become more conservative.
Yeah.
And I guess the fact that I separate the two makes me a libertarian. I don't know, but I'm definitely more conservative on. It's just that when a lot of people on the left don't separate the two, they think of, and certainly when I was on the left, I did this. If they think something is immoral, they also think it should be illegal.
That's the same for conservatives, though, Keri. They think the same thing.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's
on the religious
side, the left or the right. Certainly. So if the left, for example, take the cake baking stuff. They think it's immoral if an independent business owner, its religious beliefs dictate that they don't want to make a wedding cake for a gay wedding. Yeah. They don't want to perform that service. They think that's immoral and that's discrimination. But because they think it's immoral, they also think it should be illegal. There's nothing that you can ask them about, like, well, at least I haven't found anything that if they view it to be immoral, they think it should still be legal.
Yeah.
Well, no, but the Cuties example might be one that they'd say, well, I don't like that show, but Netflix shouldn't have to scrub it.
Maybe, but I think a lot of the and I haven't read all of it, but I've read a few defenses of it. A lot of the defense I've seen of it on the left doesn't seem to think it's immoral either.
That's true.
They seem to think it's about, it's got a positive message, and so that makes the sexualized scenes necessary.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the thing. It could have been done without some of that stuff.
Well,
it just seemed like it was.
That was the Babylon Bee. It hit it on the head. They said videos of killing puppies. We made videos about killing puppies so to prove to people they shouldn't be killing puppies. I mean, that was the whole thing. That was brilliant.
The Babylon Bee. I mean, look at how successful and how funny they've become, because that tells you a lot about the current culture that we're in, because that they filled the gap of The Onion. So, and it makes sense to me based on where we're at now that the edgiest satire would be coming from a bunch of Christians.
Yeah. Isn't that funny?
Well, you know what I love is that they have, I don't know if you've seen this on Instagram now, Keri, but now they have Not the Bee, where they just reprint actual stories. And it looks exactly like the Babylon Bee. So you're scrolling by and you have to notice that the logo has a red line through it. And it's like, oh, that's not the Bee. That is a real story.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Yeah, and they'll make fun
because
of
the leftists become parodies of themselves.
They also make fun of the right, though. I mean, one of my favorite Babylon Bee headlines is, demon sees opportunity in infect food when family forgets to pray.
Yeah.
I mean, that's hilarious, right? So they're making.
They totally. What I like about them is their equal opportunity. They have just as many pieces, or at least they used to. I know they still do that. They do a lot of pieces that skewer Christians as well, and that's funny.
They're skewing extremists. So that's the thing. They're coming from this standpoint. Like, you can be Christian and American, and sometimes those views are going to be in conflict, and you can separate those. It's the zealot that can't. Right, and that we're just seeing a lot of zealots on the left right now, and we typically had only seen them like in the religious right, at least for the most part. We definitely had seen leftist zealots, but not so many of them.
Well, I guess that's the question to you, Carter, then, is like, is the conservative camp becoming more nerfed? Is it more acceptable today? Because like growing up in the 90s, conservatives were very hardline on a lot of stuff that I didn't agree with, but now it seems to be softening.
Yeah, video games are
exactly
inciting violence and so on.
Beavis and Butthead, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But, what do you think?
Record labels for warning for, for all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think what happened with the right is there were some untenable moral positions that the right took in the 80s, gay marriage being one of them, that led people who may otherwise agree with them on some points, and I'll use myself as an example, to describe, I was 20 years ago, I described myself as a libertarian, basically, a little over 20 years ago, right? And one of the reasons for that was I thought people should be able to marry who they wanted and ingest drugs that they wanted. But I liked the conservative positions at the time on the economy, the purported conservative positions. I've grown up and realized that conservatives are just progressives driving the speed limit. But at the time, I was like, okay, they're talking small government stuff, but they have these peccadillos. They've got these their panties in a twist about gay marriage and drugs and stuff that like just is no one's business, and they should just leave them alone. But I think what's happened is the younger generation came along, and because the religious right kind of lost those battles deservedly, or at least they lost the gay marriage battle, the younger generation came along and said, well, just because I support gay marriage doesn't mean I have to be on the left now. Now I can be either one, because everyone supports gay marriage, basically. And so it opened up, I think, a political space that was closed off to people who recognized, or at least had the opinion that these certain viewpoints were just abhorrent, and I can't go that direction, so I'm not going to look at anything the conservatives say. I'm not a big fan of conservatism, though, because I don't think it stands for anything. I've never seen, if I look again, on the outside, I look over the course of my life, I'm in my mid-40s. The conservatives have accomplished zero. How history has gone continuously is we believe in small government, and then the Democrats come along and say, we want a bigger government. And they say, let's compromise and we'll have a half as big government as you want. And then that just repeats over and over and over and over and over again. And so I don't see any reason to be a conservative, because conservatives are full of crap. They don't believe anything they're saying. They have no principles. All they do is talk about something, and then when they get elected, never actually implement any of the things that they've talked about. So I'm just, you know.
So you're talking about conservative politicians, not conservatives, then? Because a conservative voter might have said, "This is the guy I voted
then," right? Like, and I don't even know what the conservative. I don't even know what the conservative. What are you conserving?
I mean, liberty. Like, you know,
that's not a conservative position. I mean, you could be a libertarian, and I mean, I'm not a big fan of libertarians either, just to be clear, because of lack of principle. But I get that you want to. I get that liberty matters, and as someone who says I'm a small government pro-liberty person, I get that. That means something to me. But when someone says the word "I'm conservative," I don't really know what that means. I have no idea, because sometimes people will say that, and it's like, I'm conservative, so I think we should increase military spending and bomb Iraq. It's like, well, how is that liberty?
But then just instead
of
asking for a label, just ask them what you believe. What are your values? You know, that'd be probably a better way to get at it.
Yeah,
that's
no,
the problem
absolutely.
with the word liberal now,
that's why I don't like the word.
Okay.
Right.
But that's the problem with the word liberal now, too, is because liberal has come to mean a lot of things that are not liberal. And so we really just have to ask people.
I mean, there's the class. So, okay, again, 20 years ago, I didn't want to call myself a libertarian, so I looked for other terms. And you know what I was told by the older people in the movement? Oh, it's a classical liberal. Okay, fine. But let's be honest, the word liberal has not meant classical liberal for my entire life.
Yeah.
So liberal means on the left. It's always meant on the left. For everyone who's alive today, it's been on the left.
Carter, you are in luck, because
we've lost that word.
I'm going to give you the label that you're looking for. You are politically non-binary.
Right. I identify as a large empty room of politics.
Yeah, there you go.
We're politics fluid.
That's hilarious.
I'm actually, just to be clear, I'm actually an anarcho-capitalist.
Okay.
So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting though.
I do have a position.
But the left seems to call anybody that doesn't agree with them a conservative. So, you know, I think they're even watering down that word.
Right. But Michael Rodriguez at the Better Discourse events also identifies as an anarcho-capitalist too, and he was for open borders. So I think you might have to stick with politically non-binary.
During an interview, and he said he was trolling the other anarcho-capitalist in the room, and I said I think I was the only one, so I don't think the whole word. No one understood what he was talking about. But he had some conception that like it was a room full of ANCAPs, which is it wasn't at all.
He's not ANCAP? Is that what he said?
Huh?
He said he was. I guess I don't know if he was being satirical or not. Was he?
Yeah, he's not an anarcho-capitalist. I had a conversation with him about this, and I said, "Well, why'd you say that?" And he basically said, "Well, I was just trolling all you guys." And I was like, I don't think that worked, dude. You didn't know your audience. Like, literally, you only got me, and I believed you. And I was curious about how the hell you could support open borders.
We are in an age where people are using newspeak all the time.
Yeah.
Up means down, down means up. We have to define the terms liberal and conservative. Everything means something to, different to different people. It's hard enough to understand what people mean when they say certain words that I'm pretty much over sarcasm. And like just tell me what you think, because if that was a troll, I completely missed it.
So did I.
Right. I missed it, guys. It's okay. We all missed it. We all missed it.
That's interesting.
So, it is what it is.
That's interesting.
Yeah. See, what I'm worried about is just us devolving into like a little bit, like I'm going to compare it to Iraq, but not so much that they're in the third world and they're seeing what they're seeing, but they're a democracy that has a Shia majority and a Sunni minority that they'll go at each other, right? And you can, whoever gets this, they don't trust each other. They're worried about them, taking the political leverage and using against the bad guys. And I almost feel like, although ours isn't a religious thing like the Shia and the Sunni, but we have kind of woke and non-woke. And I almost feel that could function in the exact same way.
Woke is a religion.
Yeah,
it's totally a religious thing.
It totally
right?
Is. Yeah.
Woke is woke's a cult. It is a religious belief because it's not, because there's no null hypothesis, right? So which is religious, right? There's no null hypothesis. No matter what you say, if you argue with it, that's your white fragility speaking. And if you're black and you argue with it, you have internalized whiteness. There's no counter. So it's religion. It's not a rational, like, well thought out position. And I actually don't even think it's a belief system. I think it's a psychological dysfunction that's just manifest en masse.
That's a really good
But
point.
I mean, if we want to start talking about politics, though, Keri and I talk about this all the time. Like, the real distinction that I'm seeing that matters, because, Keri's not an anarcho-capitalist and we get along in many ways. We don't agree on everything, but we get along in many ways. What matters is not, are you on the left or are you on the right? It's, where are you on the authoritarian and individualism scale, right? Where do you sit on that scale? And the fact is that the modern left is way pegged over on the authoritarian end in a way that makes them almost indistinguishable from fascists, literally.
That's a really good
But
point.
your average person on the left, so when we say that, maybe that's true for the people wielding power. But it seems like if we're going to cross like the Shia-Sunni divide or the woke-non-woke divide, we have to have a new narrative of what binds us as Americans. We used to, and that was part of the history and Thomas Jefferson and all of that. And you could pull in people like Frederick Douglass and you could pull in Martin Luther King and make this as diverse as you wanted, but you had a narrative. We don't anymore. How can we create that again?
Well, because the narrative, though, was individualism. Fundamentally, it was the philosophical products of the Enlightenment. The narrative was that in America, you ought to be treated as an individual and not judged on the basis of your skin color or what group you belong to or the sins of your father. You're an individual and you should be free and free to take any action that you deem necessary to pursue your own happiness, provided that it doesn't infringe on other people's rights. I mean, that was the essence of America. That's why so many people came here, right? And so, and I think the thing that unites look at Frederick Douglass. He's a great example. His admonishment of slavery was not America's bad. It was the principles that founded the nation were spot on, but America did not live up to those principles, and it's time that America lives up to those principles. That's a unifying message, and it's a correct message. And so if we want to be a nation that adopts that message, fine. But what we've done for the past several decades is, more than several decades, we've pushed an ideology predominantly through university. Started out in academia and now it's metastasized everywhere. We've pushed an ideology that is inimical to the very idea of individualism. Individualism is listed as a system of white oppression. It's whiteness to like individualism. So they've divided us fundamentally at what it means to be American. They've divided us at that level. And so I think you're worried about the mass of people in the middle. I don't think they matter. I think they're irrelevant. History gets moved by the people at the ends, the actors. There's a small percentage of radical leftists that will act, and they'll either drag the middle with them or someone else will drag the middle in another direction, and the middle will go that way. But the middle doesn't make decisions. It's this is kind of common in history, right? It doesn't take, the Russian Revolution wasn't everyone revolting. It was a very small percentage of people. And that's true for almost every revolution. It isn't everyone. It's a small percentage of actors, and people go along with it. So our enemy, the people to fight, are not the people in the middle. Yeah, you can convince them and recruit them to your side. But it's the ideology that is explicitly anti-American. And there's no compromise with that ideology.
Yeah, we got to do an interview with Yasmin Mohammed. Are you guys familiar with her?
Yes.
Yeah.
And that was one of my favorites because she in the middle of the interview sort of had this epiphany about why it was that she couldn't bring people in America who are on the left over to her side of standing up for women's rights in these majority Islamic countries. She said, if I present it in the right way, if I present it to an American leftist where I'm talking about like women are being oppressed,
Right.
come stand with me, and they're not. And she had this epiphany of, oh, they don't share the same philosophical beliefs that I do anymore. And that's what you're saying, Carter, is it's almost this ideology, this social justice ideology, woke ideology, critical race theory, intersectionalism, whatever you want to call it, it's cut us off from our roots. It's fundamentally opposed to individualism, and it's opposed to equality. It's for equity, but it's opposed to equality. It's for forced equality of outcome. Mm-hmm. And it's also for because they view the world as a struggle for power between identity groups. And they've put Islam in the that group is one of their marginalized or oppressed groups. Yep. They will never criticize it.
That's right.
It doesn't matter if she grounds her argument in, but women are being oppressed.
That's right.
They're like, oh, but people who are Muslim are oppressed, and so therefore I can't say anything about this. I can't have an opinion.
Yeah, the lived experience of oppression is the one thing that can't be deconstructed.
Yeah, and that was an interesting. It's an interesting scenario with Yasmin and a lot of the ex-Muslim activists that are pushing for women's rights. Not wearing the hijab, the mutilation practices, things like that, and it's interesting to see like their audience is actually leans more conservative. I know you don't like that term, Carter, but because
I get it, but
like conservative, like the new conservative, I guess. So because those people, the new conservatives, actually care about that, and you're right. The left does not want to say anything bad about Islam, even though they're destroying people's lives.
Yeah. Just from I just want to add this thing because it just popped into my head, and I think it's important to understand when you're talking about the kind of masses, the majority of kind of people. I won't even call them in the middle. They're just nebulous. They haven't thought about it. They don't know where they are. They'll probably make up their mind the day before the election who to vote for, if they're going to vote at all. Mm-hmm. What's appealing to people is principled stances on things. This is why radical Islam beats out milquetoast Islam in the Middle East every time. People like principled stances that are consistent. And the left, this is why I don't like the conservative movement generally. The left is principled. They're horrible principles. They're cultish, religious, Marxist / postmodern principles. But they're principles, and they're pretty clear, and you know what you're getting with the left. And I think the only way to fundamentally get people to reject that is to show them another principled alternative that is better. And I think that principled alternative, it's not something we have to invent. It's invented in our founding documents. It was invented in the Enlightenment. Like the idea of individual rights and individualism is already here. We can just talk about it and principally, like, apply it consistently and be principled about that. And I think that's what will activate people.
I disagree, though. I don't think, maybe I just disagree on the word principle, because I see principles as universal, and they don't have principles because they contradict themselves all the time.
Well, in that sense, I would agree with you with the caveat that I'm using principles in a very broad brush. I don't think any religion has principles because it's a set of rules that are applied, but they're never consistent because they're not universally applied. So I view it as a religion. It's not a philosophically derived like hierarchy of values that's applied universally, but it is a set of rules, and there's a rule book, and you follow the rules, and you follow the rules all the time. Those are the rules.
Well, it's interesting.
But I agree. Technically, you're correct.
Well, I was to say it's interesting because, like, in the atheist community, we saw, like, from 2001 to I'd say like 2013. That all religions were on the table, like the events and the podcasts and stuff. They would always talk. The ex-Muslims were actually very big because they were brave, and they were viewed as brave to come out and speak against Islam and like all the things that were happening. And that was that was one of the principles of the atheist community back then, but that just like changed so quickly after they adopted intersectionality and things. So it's interesting. Like I don't know. I don't know if you can get people back. 'Cause like the atheist community, I don't think you can get them back to wanting to criticize Islam. I don't know.
Well, principles.
Atheists are a pain in the ass because I say that with the love of a fellow atheist, right?
Yeah.
I'm an atheist. But the fact is, most of us are Marxists. Most of us are state theists, actually. And I think the problem with the atheists is they think that the non-belief in a thing is somehow sufficient to unite them. And it's not. The non-belief in a God is just a non-belief in a thing.
It
It doesn't
enough
say
to
what you believe. It doesn't say what you do stand for. And so it was never enough to unify a group to do anything and to be coherent.
Yeah, well, it is for revolution, right? That this you bring the Soviet Union in, for example. You have a lot of people. You have Trotskyites, socialists. You have different Marxists, Stalinists, all pushing in the same direction. Of course, once the system goes down, now what takes over? Right now, it's a power grab. So there are people that were pushing in the same direction as you that now are up against the wall, right? Because somebody's got to take over.
This is the problem, though, right? Because in fact, the groups that you mentioned are also really annoying as an atheist because they claim that they're the if you're rational, you're a Marxist. That's the rational solution. I'm rational. I'm empirical. I'm data driven. I'm a rational person. No, Marxism is not rational.
Right.
It's based on axioms that fall apart, that are provably false, and it's self-contradictory at its very core. I mean, even go back to Hegel. It's built on philosophical sand. It's not rational. But they've taken that title and they've said rational is Marxist. And I think what's happened is you've got a lot of people now who figure, well, the only way to oppose Marxism is to be religious, because apparently if you're 100% rational, you've got to be a Marxist. And that's just not true.
I don't know if they call it rational. It's
a lot
an ideal.
of atheists end up accepting that without doing the thought, without putting the work in to think about it themselves, and they end up going in that direction because some people say that it's rational.
But is it rational or is it an ideal? Is the Constitution?
No, it's irrational.
You might have said in
Completely
1776, the Declaration of Independence, Constitution, that this isn't rational. You're not going to be able to take on these global powers. This is not a rational project. But it certainly was an idealistic project, and like you said, those ideals are good. I think that's what they're saying is Marxism is an ideal. I don't.
Well, they're arguing that it's the scientific. I mean, it was always argued as the scientific political system, right? This is what came out of science, right? So I think if you're going to use the word rational, you have to ask yourself really basic, fundamental philosophical questions like, let's solve metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics from a rational perspective before we talk about what kind of political system to have. Marx just starts with this need is important, and the state. I mean, look at Hegel. Hegel's position is that the state literally is the manifestation of some godlike universe being, and the purpose of the state is to manifest the universe's will. And so whatever the state does is good, and people are just tools for the manifestation of the universe's will. I don't know how that's considered rational, but that's the freaking starting point for Marx. So if you're going to have a discussion about reason and a rational system, you've got to derive ethics first before you start talking about how to apply it to politics.
I guess what? Put a beard on Joe Biden and call him the old Jesus.
Wait, what?
You were talking about the being the God. And I was trying
the state being
I was trying to transform Joe Biden into that guy. I don't know.
Egypt thought
he does say some curious things that maybe you need to be high to understand. So I don't know.
Yeah.
ABK says, super chat, as Reagan said, the Democrats left you. I think we are seeing people on both sides have had enough. Trump will win bigger than last time. You heard it here. Heard it here first, maybe.
Ooh,
Great
ABK,
discussion.
ABK saying landslide.
Yeah.
Well, guys,
I agree.
thank you so much for coming on. I know we've been on over an hour, and I want to keep you guys all day. Thank you again. And by the way, your channel's awesome. I love it. And thanks for putting up those interviews, or starting to put up the interviews from Better Discourse.
We have others.
Yeah.
They're coming.
Yeah. The Jack one, he's great. You know, like Jack, I love Jack Posobiec. I don't care. You know, like people attack him all the time, whatever. I mean, these people are assholes online, but he is.
He's one of those guys who definitely, when I was in the social justice cult, I wasn't aware of him then, but if I had been, I would have avoided him without knowing anything about him.
Oh yeah.
But and since I've gotten to a place now where I don't like the guilt by association game, and so people try to play that with me on Twitter and other things, like, oh, you once retweeted Jack Posobiec or whoever, and they try to attack you for that, and I don't like that game. I refuse to play it.
It's disgusting.
So once I started looking at his stuff, I mean, the guy's brilliant.
He's brilliant.
You may agree with his politics or not, but I think it's undeniable that he's very turned on intellectually, and I mean, he's fluent in Mandarin.
I know. That's exactly what the guy's a wealth of knowledge. He's fluent in Mandarin. He's served. Like, the guy is like, and his wife's unbelievable. Tanya, she's fantastic. And it's like, what can't you like about this guy? You know, you meet him in person and stuff, but we'll get people online that are like, oh, you're just, you guys are just legitimizing Jack on Twitter. It's like, what the hell are you guys talking about? Like, first of all, like, if Jack retweets us, like, we get more traffic than our account's ever seen ever. So I don't know how we're legitimizing anything.
He doesn't need us to legitimize him or you guys.
It's the same.
Yeah, and plus, they never do that to me. And I don't know about you guys, but they never do that to me with social justice warrior. They never say, why are you still following this social justice person?
Right.
Because social justice ideology is actually radical. It's actually extreme. It's actually racist. And I'm still friends with people who are in it. But I never get called to the carpet for that.
Right.
Why are you still friends with these SJWs?
Yeah.
Account for it.
In fairness, I do ask you that question quite often.
Carter does.
Yeah.
But people were saying, like, we would need somebody to be the healer. Like, what I almost feel like we need a new marriage counselor for the United States, right? The left and right. I would elect Jonathan Haidt. Keri, who would you pick if you had a national marriage counselor?
Okay, I would pick Marianne Williamson, but I'd have to work with her first to help eradicate the woke part of her.
CRT.
But I think she could get rid of the woke part. Carter's beating his head on the microphone. I have a soft spot for her.
So
I think
do
she's right. She gets some things right, and I think she's actually open-minded. Not just believes that she is. And I think if she had the right people in her life, you could help eradicate the wokeness, and then she would be a good healer.
All right, Carter, I'll give you. I agree. I find something charming about that woman too. Again, don't agree with her, but there's something in there that I don't know what it is. It needs more examination. Carter, who would you elect for national marriage counselor?
You're not going to like my answer. I would elect a national divorce attorney.
No, irreconcilable differences.
The best, most aggressive divorce attorney I can find. I'm willing to give away all of California, possibly more.
But who would be your divorce
attorney? If the judge isn't going to grant it, so the judge says you're 3 months with the counselor, then you can file for divorce. You've got to pick them. Who do you pick?
Michael Malice. Because I don't want it to work out. And I don't think he'll be on my side. And no, I don't. Again, guys, I mean, I'm not trying to be an ass about it. But I just I don't want to work anything. I want to work things out with people who ascribe to individualism, and we have differences of how to implement it.
Sure.
I don't want to work things out with people who are against fundamentally the tenets of individualism. I don't. I want them to have their own country, and I want to have my own country, and I want a big wall in between us.
Autonomous zone.
That's it.
I want to jump in because Miles in chat I just saw said Jordan Peterson, and I can't believe I didn't think of him. But yes, Jordan Peterson, who is a counselor. I think he would make a great.
Yeah, he would work.
A counselor, is he? I guess
a therapist.
Yeah,
I mean, he's sat with patients before.
Yep.
You know?
Yeah.
And he comes from the standpoint, and I tend to agree with him, that we need a healthy left and a healthy right. And right now we're seeing quite a bit of unhealthiness because it's just invective. That's the thing. Trump voters want death, right? So assuming Biden wins, they're still going to worry about this 45% of these people that voted for Trump. and that they're also going to be like, well, we got to protect ourselves from them in the same way that the right is trying to protect themselves from woke.
You know who I would pick?
Who'd you pick?
Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan.
Oh,
and the reason I picked Joe is A, the guy's a extreme lefty, and B, he has this amazing ability to talk to both the intellectuals and the common person, and I think that's what we're missing in a lot of these conversations. Is the IDW is very focused on the high intellectual people, and they have really good points, but it's hard for the common person to digest those, and I think Joe really breaks down those barriers. I think he's the guy, and that's why I totally think that Biden-Trump thing is brilliant.
Yep. And we're all sexist because we all pick men.
No, I picked Marianne Williamson.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry. Yeah, my bad. Well, I don't know how she technically. I didn't ask her how she identifies today, so you're right. But right,
she identifies as a transhuman kook.
Hey, Carter.
The only thing with Williamson, the whole having white people apologize to black people, I
know.
do not.
But the psychic energy thing, like I don't
like
think there's a real
either.
thing of psychic energy, but there is.
I don't like
There's an unrealistic fear that I think most people on the right have of people on the left, and vice versa. And to me, that psychic energy is a fine description of that.
Crystals aren't going to do it though. Like, I don't know.
What she's saying is, at least she's identified the problem.
Very hard science,
right? Of like, if we're gonna go fishing,
that's not a like. I don't think that doesn't count as a definition. That's just like a hippie. There's energy, and you have bad energy. There's bad juju and vibes. Like, if they were gonna identify, like Jonathan Haidt maybe identifies like, here are the psychological differences between the sides and what's going on. That's identifying the problem.
Yeah.
Saying like there's hippie juju vibes that are bad is not identifying the problem. That's just being a moron.
Yeah.
Really?
I agree with that. Bring them into the studio, Rogan. Have them both smoke a little bit of weed, and then have the discussion. That's how you do it.
That's fair.
That's how you do it. Well, guys, thank you so much. No, go ahead. Go ahead, Keri.
I've had interesting conversations about who, if he were still alive, I don't think he would be on the woke train. Now that I've learned a little more about him, is John Lennon.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And have you followed Sean Lennon? Sean Lennon stuff?
Yes.
Yeah.
John Lennon is anti-woke.
Oh yeah.
And John Lennon, I didn't know enough about him, and so I assumed he would be on the woke side, especially since you see all these woke celebrities co-opting his song Imagine and redoing it. But the more that I'm learning about him, the more I'm starting to agree with the people who say like he would be someone speaking against this.
Yeah. Well, it's really awesome seeing Sean start to speak out. He was at Minds IRL. I don't know if you guys know that, but he was there. And,
I didn't know that.
Yeah, like incognito, but it was awesome. Like he doesn't want to get too political because of obvious reasons and Yoko and the whole thing, but the guy is brilliant, and he's thought about this a lot, and you could tell. Like, I agree totally with John. I mean, I followed the Beatles, like that whole thing for years and years and years. But yeah, John Lennon's form of progressivism was more what we would call like anti-woke today. Like it was the liberal stuff. He was very. Very pro, like the progressive stuff we would have said in the 90s, but yeah, anti-authoritarian.
An actual
absolutely.
Progressive.
Yes. Yeah. And yeah.
Don't tell that to Ben Shapiro, though.
Yeah. I hope Sean gets more involved.
Hates the song Imagine so much that he said it almost as much as he says his wife's a doctor.
Well, I kind of, I don't know. I don't watch Ben Shapiro, but I do have to agree. I hate the song Imagine as well. So I understand the anger about the song Imagine. But didn't John Lennon, he was opposed to like Mao and stuff, right? So
yes.
We're experiencing the Cultural Revolution just in the US now. So I have to assume that if he stuck to those principles, he would be against cancel culture.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know, but just like the Revolutionary Guard got thrown to the dogs, I wonder will Antifa get thrown to the dogs in the same way?
Well, he's anti-violence too. He was all for revolution and stuff, but extreme anti-violence.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Which is what I thought wasn't going to be a thing to sell, but Brian and I have had this debate. I'm like, the left can't advocate for violence, and then then they end up doing that for months. which I couldn't.
No, but they're
I couldn't
doing the
even-
same thing. Like
couldn't
they're
believe.
condemning all violence in the same way that they criticized Trump for condemning all forms of bigotry and not singling out white supremacy and the ideology.
They weren't
there.
condemning
They
violence.
don't do it. Well, he does.
They-
He says violence is unacceptable in any form.
Who?
Biden said that.
No, but he wasn't.
But he hasn't carved out
months.
specifically the Antifa or BLM. So this is like, this is like condemning the terror attack and, not saying anything about Osama bin Laden.
I don't know.
You can't do that.
Yeah.
You can't just say all violence is bad when the towers fell. You have to pick the ideology. And we did it right for a little while. But right now, they're doing the exact same thing. That's the hypocrisy people hate.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks again for coming on. Tell everyone how they can find
Thank you,
and
guys.
Your Twitter and all that fun stuff.
Our Twitter is Unsafe Space. Our channel is Unsafe Space on YouTube. And our URL is unsafespace.com. It's pretty straightforward. It might even work if you Google us, but I'm not sure because Google does indeed hate us. Yeah, that's how to find us.
And the unsafe space, and it's unsafe for people that want to be in an echo chamber, but otherwise totally safe. I highly recommend it. Really good stuff there. And awesome seeing you guys in person at the Better Discourse event. Hopefully we can do one of those again. We are thinking on it. Stay on afterwards. And thanks for tuning in, everyone. And thanks for the super chats. We really appreciate the discussion.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.